Hi guys, thank you very much for coming to my session. My name is Jessica and I'm a data strategy consultant at a data research firm called Neudata, and my work centers on reducing the market inefficiencies in the data and AI market sector. So what do I mean by that? Please just let me know if this sounds, if you can hear me all right, because it sounds like it's a bit cut off. All right, thank you very much. So what do I mean by I reduce market inefficiency is that I work with companies. They have a core business operation that is not data solutions, but in the process of running that operation, they create some sort of data byproducts that could be really valuable and interesting to other data users. And I work with them to create that strategy to productize and monetize that byproduct and connect them with the other data users that would find value in the byproducts. So today, I would like to share a story exactly about the problem of data market inefficiency and discuss with you how we can actually solve this problem. So let's get started. So, as part of the AI industry, I'm pretty sure all of us have heard this refrain that we are running out of data very, very frequently. Well, as much as that sounds really sensationalist, I'm thinking that is actually pretty much some merit and validity to that claim. And what do I mean by that? To understand, where the validity is in this claim, let's actually go back to the beginning and consider where we're sourcing our data to train AI and why we are now facing challenges in these traditional data sources. So as you know, traditionally for AI model makers, they are getting their AI training or fine-tuning data sets primarily from three sources. The most common being web scrape data and data commons, and the biggest will be common crawl. So by Mozilla Foundation's estimate, between the year 2019 and 2023, about 60% of all our text foundation models were actually trained on some versions of common crawl data sets. So for instance, as you're definitely aware that OpenAI's GPT-3 model was actually trained on common crawl. And apart from that, we also know that AI makers are working with a lot of published materials, such as academic journals and also news publications and books. But recently, we are seeing more challenges to these traditional data sources. So, for instance, a lot of content-heavy websites, as you're aware now, they are implementing a lot more anti-web scraping measures, such as requiring a login to access their websites, such as New York Times and a lot of news publications and LinkedIn. At the same time, you remember that recently Cloudflare also announced this new beta product called Papercrawl, and other internet toll gates such as Prorata, Tollbit. These solutions are now really paving ways to offset this power imbalance between data owners or website hosts as well as very powerful AI model makers by giving website owners an option and a way to start charging web scraper bots for taking that content from their websites. And at the same time, a lot of public data sets, while they're available and free to use, the issue is that they generally are pretty limited in their scope and volume for really meaningful AI use cases. And finally, as we're all following along the copyright lawsuits such as Ross AI, Meta, and Anthropic, these lawsuits are really forcing our industry and our courts to consider what exactly is a legal allowance and legal limits to using copyrighted materials, published materials to train AI. And recently, if you're following, Anthropic actually settled their lawsuit for $1.5 billion, which means we still do not have very definitive legal guidance on how much and where we could use copyrighted materials to train AI. So at this point, you must be wondering, if we're facing challenges to access these traditional data sources, then where else could we get the vast amount of data that we need to develop AI going forward? Well, I would like to offer you to think about 3 data acquisition paths going forward. So first, synthetic data. A lot of you working in big tech or working closely with AI model makers, you're aware that our foundation model makers are increasingly using more and more synthetic data because they simply just couldn't source that much data that they need to upgrade their models. But at the end of the day, synthetic data is really not as optimal as human-generated data, isn't it? Because, for starters, they do not have the realism of real human-generated data. And to bring that perspective back to industry, as I sit between a lot of data providers or data owners, as well as data users, I've seen a fair share of synthetic data providers, coming to my team in the past year or two, asking for guidance and advisory to really expedite and accelerate their data sales. But the issue is, initially we were really excited. It's a very new data category to work with. It's a novel technology to work with. But for some reason, I'm just not seeing enough traction in the market. Data users are simply not biting for the exact reason that synthetic data is not real. They need realistic data for their analytics and AI development. So what else could we do here? And that's what I'm here today. I would like to actually introduce two other paths forward to you guys. First, that is, instead of getting entrenched in a very costly web scraping versus anti-web scraping war, going direct for content licensing with content owners is one of the pathways forward. And this is a tested and trusted method so far. We've seen, a lot of foundation model makers are working directly with content owners, such as publishers or content host platforms to license that data directly. And the other path forward is more, I would call it more interesting and more novel in the sense they have always existed, but they're just not yet overlapping with the AI sector yet. That is the enterprise data market, which in my opinion is the next data frontier. What I mean here is that enterprise data is basically any and all the data that's generated in the course of a company's operations. And just imagine having access to human-generated data or data from human-run operations that covers across all sorts of industries, domains, and functions, and that's collated in a lot of languages. Having access to that data, that realism, that is basically a treasure trove for AI development. But, you might be wondering, that sounds good in theory, but does it actually work? Well, I'm just going to spend the next few minutes or so to give you some real-life examples to let these real-life case studies speak for themselves. So first, I'm going to talk about direct content licensing, and after that, I will move on to enterprise data market. So first of all, direct data licensing, there is enough market information to prove that this is a ready and a viable business model. So this summer, I studied and basically analyzed 50 major content licensing deals that's inked between 2023 to date between major AI developers and content owners. Initially, media publishers such as newspaper owners were leading the deal making, but increasingly, I'm seeing more social media platforms or user-generated content platforms. They're coming around to this idea to directly license their data to AI model makers, which signals that the market is ready, content owners are ready and willing to work with AI model makers. And to really illustrate that, here's a real-life case that's closer to home. So here is a project I've done for Trustpilot, a dear client of ours. So for those who are not familiar with Trustpilot, it is one of the world's largest consumer product reviews website. They host over 150 million product reviews in a dozen European languages on their platform that covers virtually all the business verticals that's under the sun. Which means that data will be really valuable for any AI developers upgrading foundation models or creating consumer analytics or consumer AI applications. And Trustpilot's business model is really interesting. They focus, their entire philosophy is about openness, which means their website is open and free for any users to go on their website to read and write any reviews. That is super user-friendly, but the only issue is that it is also extremely bot-friendly. As a result, they are experiencing so much unauthorized web scraping activities from a lot of AI bots, among other bots. So what we did for them was to first investigate the extent of their unauthorized scraping problem. And we found out that they were easily, 14 well-known brand name commercial web scrapers out there offering a customized Trustpilot scraper solution. And if you were to go on GitHub today, you're going to find easily over 2,000 codes to scrape Trustpilot. So what do we do here? Well, our solution for Trustpilot was multi-pronged. So first, clearly, we recommended technical solutions to either block, reduce, or misdirect those bots. But at the same time, we also recommended, if you can't beat them, join them. Instead of getting worked up in this, this whole war with web scrapers, how about offering them a data solution? Offer the AI makers a license to use their data. It's clean, it's complete. It's a way better way to source data than to web scrape it. So as a result of this, as many of you who might be recently, in the AI conference circuit, you would have heard Trustpilot presenting their data solutions. They call it trust layers. That's exactly to work with data buyers. And now let's just quickly move on to the other path forward, that is the enterprise data. To recap and quickly, just for simple definition, again, enterprise data, any and all the data that's generated as part of a business operation, where the operation, it is not data solutions. This is not a foreign concept to many of us here. Traditionally, we've used enterprise data for business intelligence, competitive intelligence, but increasingly now, companies are actually using their in-house enterprise data to feed into their in-house AI solutions to fine-tune that. Mostly in the back-end solutions aspect of things, they also feed that into their in-house RAG models. So my question here is that, I've worked with many enterprise data owners. They are interested in monetizing, productizing this data byproduct for traditional data users. But I'm seeing this huge market inefficiency, that is, this very same data they feed into their in-house AI applications. They can also find a market and value in external AI development space. So, for instance, customer service logs or transcripts could provide really good general context data for, just general foundation model upgrades. And we also have very domain-specific knowledge from each department, from the industries that can provide that context and knowledge for vertical AI development as well as AI agents development. But at this point, you might also be wondering, is it really safe to do that? What kind of risks are we anticipating if we were to monetize enterprise data and feed that into AI models? Well, I'm going to share 2 stories, again, real-life cases I've worked on how we could, mitigate the risk or potential risks in enterprise data and make it usable and safe for AI consumption. So the very first story is about a global research firm. This is a story about how the value of enterprise data lies in both the medium of the data as well as the content. So this research firm is an established research specialist that focuses primarily on developing countries. They conduct spoken and written surveys in these countries in local languages across topics such as security, international development, and consumer behaviors. And as a result of their operations, they've collected tens of thousands of hours of natural conversation recordings on these research topics. That's also in over 100 different, low resources languages and niche dialects. So this means, this data will be really valuable for those who are looking to have linguistic diversity or even to create native voice models. But remember, voice data is biometric data, so how can we make this data usable, compliantly usable, and risk-free? So first, what we did was our client, they are collecting data in a GDPR or GDPR equivalent manner with all the disclosures required. And And after they've collected the data, the first thing to do is to strip away the personal identifiable information. And after that, we investigate and explore different options to anonymize that voice data. So for instance, we could truncate the voice clips down to way shorter clips, such that it doesn't allow re-identification of the individuals behind that voice. We also explored the option of perhaps shifting the pitch of the voice to mask the identity behind that voice. And of course, providing a transcript is the safest way to go ahead with using this language data. And as a result of this exercise, their data is now usable and suitable for a wide range of AI use cases. So for instance, you could use that to really enrich the linguistic diversity of our foundation models, because our models are generally in high resources languages such as English, Arabic, Spanish, and Mandarin. You can also use that for ASR machine translations for sure, as well as to develop small language models. But what's really exciting is that the fact that they have natural conversation data that allows us to develop native voice models and multimodal AI applications. So that's just on the language itself alone. And then the other aspect of it is that because they have such data in natural language on topics like security, development, and consumer insights, they could provide sentiment analysis that is tuned to certain cultural contexts. They could also use this data, you could use that data to create vertical AIs or consumer analytics. And of course, this data could also be used to contribute to voice commons for the betterment of our entire industry. And next, the other story I would like to take you guys through is about a healthcare software provider, because healthcare AI is one of the most major vertical AIs we're looking at right now. So this is a story about our client. They provide this network solution or infrastructure that underlies practically the entire US healthcare system. What do I mean by that is that they provide this communications and information exchange network for all healthcare stakeholders, such as clinics, hospitals, prescribers, pharmacies, to PBMs, to payers, to communicate and exchange information. It basically keeps our healthcare system running. And the kind of data they have access to and able to productize will be things like patient journey, end-to-end patient journey, e-prescription, and prescription fills data. But again, how do we make this data usable? Again, it's healthcare data, it's highly sensitive. So what we did here was first, all data collected and processed are in a HIPAA-compliant manner. Of course, all personal identifiable information has been taken out of their data set. And next, what we did was to explore, what are the other healthcare data products out there in the market. Look at what's the market gold standard for aggregation and generalization to apply to their data products, such that we can, reduce precision enough to mask the identities of patients, but also preserve enough granularity to ensure this data is useful. And apart from the technical product aspect, we also work together with them to create and execute a go-to-market strategy whereby we've shortlisted and evaluated a select group of highly compliant and regulated data users who we trust to be responsible data users, and we created this more enclosed marketplace for this client to work with potential data buyers. And as a result of that, we end up with a compliant, risk-free, and usable healthcare data, healthcare workflow, and prescription data that could be used to power a lot of healthcare AI applications, such as, digital healthcare companions or patient engagement tools. So all that is to say that with these three stories I've shared today, all that is to say, the enterprise data and direct content licensing are our next data frontier. Imagine just having access to this vast amount of human-generated data across all domains, in all languages, that's been churned out, created in terabytes daily, and working with right partners such as us to help you really de-risk or mitigate and prevent any risky consequences of monetizing that data. We are able to really enrich the availability and access of data out there to really gather data we need to develop our AI market. As we now, we are moving really away from focusing on using general context data to scale our model, but now really focusing on developing any vertical AI or very domain-specific AI agents. That's a kind of workflow logic data that we need from our enterprises. So, if you are developing an AI model or application and you're looking for data, or if you're working with a lot of data byproducts in your organization and you're looking to generate an extra revenue stream out of it, I would really like to hear from you guys. And please we do have a booth here, please come to our booth. I would love to explore where you fit in the whole data marketplace. And I believe we have some time for questions. Do we have any questions, please? Sir, do you mind doing that here?
Thank our speaker, Jessica. And we have time for maybe one or two questions. So somebody over here, try to get to you.
You mentioned that there's an ability to create fabricated data. I'm sure there's applications for that, but do those applications extend into other industries that need like schematic images, like schematic drawings of networking or construction drawings or a little more detailed information in different industries?
Sure. Could you just clarify that by fabricated data, do you mean synthetic data? All right, gotcha. So that would not be the most common use case for synthetic data. Generally, at this stage, most synthetic data providers are focused on creating consumer profiles, digital twins, because it contains PII, and that's not the kind of data you can easily collect and use. So most vendors are actually providing digital twins or synthetic customer personas or personal profiles, but I'm pretty sure they are not as common, but they are providers out there. But the issue I'm facing in the market is that it's really interesting, it's super exciting, but I think data buyers may not just be ready for it yet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
One more. We have time for one more question.
See, sir, behind you, please.
Okay.
So I think a lot of enterprise data are very important for their business model. And then what's the motivation for them to monetize those data? And also, can you talk about their general price range that they can generate from selling their data?
So a lot of data infrastructures or data teams in companies, they are considered a cost center. They are actually under pressure to, justify why are you, costing so much money, and to provide them a solution where they can turn that cost center into a revenue stream is actually strategically really attractive based on our experience. And in terms of price point, it really depends. It depends on the use case, for instance. Who's a buyer, what they are using it for, how much data they are looking for, and how sought after that particular data category or data type is. That entirely depends on the use case.